This is Federalist 7, Part 4. If you can, read this book. It's by Joseph Alice. It's called The Quartet. It talks about the lives of George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, and their importance in the founding of the United States government. If you can't read the book, make sure you watch to all his talks on C-SPAN, as well as YouTube and other sites about this book and about his other books. Suppose the difficulties of agreeing upon a rule surmounted and the apportionment made. Still, there is great room to suppose that the rule agreed upon would, upon experiment, be found to bear harder upon some states than upon others. Those which were sufferers by it would naturally seek for a mitigation of the burden. The others would as naturally be disinclined to a revision, which was likely to end in an increase of their own encumbrances. Their refusal would be too plausible a pretext to the complaining states to withhold their contributions, not to be embraced with avidity, and the non-compliance of these states with their engagements would be a ground of bitter dissension and altercation. If even the rule adopted should in practice justify the equality of its principle, still delinquencies in payment on the part of some of the states would result from a diversity of other causes. The real deficiency of resources, the mismanagement of their finances, accidental disorders in the administration of the government, and in addition to the rest, the reluctance with which men commonly part with money for purposes that have outlived the exigencies which produce them and interfere with the supply of immediate wants. Delinquencies from whatever causes would be productive of complaints, recriminations, and quarrels. There is perhaps nothing more likely to disturb the tranquility of nations than their being bound to mutual contributions for any common object that does not yield an equal and coincident benefit. For it is an observation as true as it is trite, that there is nothing men differ so readily about as the payment of money. Laws in violation of private contracts, as they amount to aggressions on the rights of those states whose citizens are injured by them, may be considered as another probable source of hostility. We are not authorized to expect that a more liberal or more equitable spirit would preside over the legislations of the individual states hereafter, if unrestrained by additional checks, than we have heretofore seen in too many instances disgracing their several codes. We have observed the disposition to retaliation excited in Connecticut in consequence of the enormities perpetrated by the legislature of Rhode Island, and we reasonably infer that in similar cases, under other circumstances, a war not of parchment, but of the sword would chastise such atrocious breaches of moral obligation and social justice. Okay, just keep in mind that the state of Rhode Island, this little state right here, was creating a lot of trouble for the other states. Remember, one of the main problems with America's first Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, was that one state could stop any amendment to be added to the Constitution. So you had to have all the 13 states agree. And this was a big block, big stumbling block. So you had states like Delaware or Rhode Island, whose population was maybe 1/60th of state of Virginia, could stop an amendment to the Constitution. So here he's reminding the readers that just a state like Rhode Island can create problems for us under this old Constitution. The new Constitution is going to give you other ways of getting around it. And also, he says, it is not going to be war not on parchment, but of the sword. In other words, it's not going to be a fight that you will take to the courts to see whether it's legal or not. Because he uses the word parchment barrier throughout the Federalist. It's a constitution that is written on parchment. Back then what they used was animal skin or things like that. He says that parchment is not going to stop these people from going to war. It will be a war of swords. In other words, they'll kill each other. They'll draw their swords, and it'll be settled on the battleground rather than in a court. So he's warning the people to be aware. The probability of incompatible alliances between the different states or confederacies and different foreign nations, and the effects of this situation upon the peace of the whole, have been sufficiently unfolded in some preceding papers. In the papers before this, we talked about how foreign nations can come and mess things up for us, to interfere with the workings of our government, to interfere with our politics. From the view that they have exhibited of this part of the subject, this conclusion is to be drawn, that America, if not connected at all, or only by the feeble tie of a simple league, offensive or defensive, would, by the operation of such jarring alliances, be gradually entangled in all the pernicious labyrinths of European politics and wars. See, he says that we will be drawn into the politics of the old continent, of Europe, and they will be drawn into our politics. We don't want us to get entangled, to get mixed in with their politics, and we don't want them to be entangled in ours. This verb is one that George Washington uses later on to warn his countrymen to stay away from getting mixed in with the old countries, with the old systems, with those old monarchies and kings which do not appreciate and do not like republicanism. And by the destructive contentions of the parts into which she was divided, would be likely to become a prey to the artifices and machinations of powers equally the enemies of them all. Divide et impera must be the motto of every nation that either hates or fears us. It uses that Latin phrase, divide et impera, means divide and rule, divide and command. It says the Europeans will realize that if they divide us, they can rule us easily. So if we are a very weak league like we are under the Confederation, or if we make ourselves into 3 or 4 confederacies, or we become 13 different countries, this will put a smile on the European powers' faces, because they know they can divide and conquer us. That is another one of those good reasons for us to stay united, not to be weak. So please remember to listen to the talks by these professors or read these books. This one, like I said, The Brilliant Solution, is about the Constitutional Convention. It's a short book, it's a good book. Unruly Americans, it talks about the debtors and creditors. It's a really good book. I think you should be familiar with it. Both of them talk about these books on C-SPAN, so you can watch them there, but you can also listen to their talks in other places. And the other book that I mentioned to you was The Quartet by Joseph Ellis. Just familiarize yourself with them.